My brother took $30,000 from my account. My father told me to let it go. He said family helps family. He said do not be greedy. I did not call the police. I just smiled. Because that was not my personal savings, it was my father's secret retirement fund. He asked me to manage it, and he had no idea his golden child had just cleaned it out. My name is Hailey, I work in finance. I manage portfolios, assess risk, and help people protect the money they have spent their lives earning. I am careful with numbers. I notice when things do not add up. That is my job. The problem is, I spent years not doing my job when it came to my own family. I saw the numbers, I just chose not to read them. My brother Brandon is older than me. He has been the center of my family since the day he was born. My mother organized her schedule around his needs. My father measured success by how Brandon was doing that month. When Brandon was struggling, the whole family bent itself around his crisis. Nobody ever asked if the rest of us could take the weight. They just assumed we would hold. My father is a man who believes in structure and order for everyone except his son. When it comes to Brandon, every rule evaporates. He decided a long time ago that Brandon needed protection more than accountability. He never said that out loud. The math said it for him. My mother is warm and present and completely unaware of how much of the family machinery operates behind her back. She believes Brandon pays his own rent. She asked once at dinner how he managed it on his income. My father jumped in before Brandon could answer and said the business was picking up. My mother smiled and moved on. She believed it because she wanted to believe it. And nobody at that table corrected her. She believes my father's retirement is on track. She believes the family finances are simple and stable. None of that is true. And the two men in her life have been keeping it that way for years. Brandon has had a business for as long as I can remember. Or at least he has had the idea of a business. He talks about it at every family gathering. Branding, strategy, investors, vision. He uses words that sound like progress but produce nothing. He has changed the name of this business 4 times. He has never shown a profit. He has never hired an employee. He has never filed a tax return that reflected anything other than loss. But in my family, having a dream and funding a dream are considered the same thing. And the funding always came from somewhere. My father once asked me to look at Brandon's books. I did. There were no books. There were credit card statements and subscription fees, and a website that had not been updated in a year. I told my father the business had no revenue and no structure. He said Brandon is still figuring it out. That was 3 years ago. He is still figuring it out. It came from me. I started covering Brandon's rent about 3 years ago. He had moved into an apartment he could not afford because it matched the image of the life he was building. My mother mentioned at dinner that he was stressed about money. My father pulled me aside after and said, "Your brother is going through a rough patch." He said it would help if I could cover his rent for a month or 2. He said Brandon would pay me back when the business picked up. The business never picked up. The month or 2 became permanent. I paid Brandon's rent every month for 3 years. I know how that sounds. I assess risk for a living. I tell clients to cut losses early and never let emotion override numbers. But risk feels different when the person asking is your father and the voice in your head says, "Just 1 more month." Quietly. Without acknowledgement. Without a timeline. Without a single conversation about when it would end. Brandon never thanked me. He never mentioned it. And in front of my mother and the rest of the family, he talked about his apartment the way people talk about things they earned. He said he liked the neighborhood. He said the building had good energy. He said he was glad he had found something within his budget, my bank account. Nobody in my family knew I was paying his rent except my father. And my father treated that information the way he treated most uncomfortable truths. He filed it under things we do not discuss and moved on. Then my father came to me with another request. He said he had been putting aside money for retirement. A separate account, not the one my mother knew about. He said he wanted to keep it private because he did not want her spending decisions to affect it. He said he needed someone he trusted to manage it and grow it. He asked me. I should have said no, I know that now. But I was the person who always said yes. I opened a separate savings account in my name. My father's money inside it. He could check the balance whenever he wanted, but I managed everything. I managed it the way I manage my clients' portfolios. Carefully. Professionally. Over time, it grew to just under $200,000. My father checked in once or twice a year. He never questioned my work. He trusted me with his money the same way he trusted me with his son's rent. Silently. Completely. Without ever saying thank you. The account sat in my name. That was the arrangement. My father's money, my name, his trust, my responsibility. And for years that system worked because nobody tested it. Then Brandon tested it. I got a notification on a Wednesday morning. A transfer alert. $30,000 had been moved out of the account. I had not authorized it. I checked where it went. Brandon's personal checking account. My father had given Brandon the login at some point, thinking he could only look at the balance. But the account let him do more than look. Brandon had transferred $30,000 into his own account in the middle of the night. I sat at my desk for a long time. I looked at the screen. I thought about calling the police. I thought about calling my father. I thought about calling Brandon. Then I thought about what would happen when my father found out that the money his golden child had just taken was not mine, it was his. I called my father first. I told him there had been an unauthorized transfer from my savings account. I did not say which account. I did not mention the retirement fund. I said someone had taken $30,000. He asked who. I said Brandon. My father's voice changed. Not to anger. To management. He went into the mode I had seen 100 times. The mode that meant Brandon had done something, and the priority was not consequences, but containment. He said, "How do you know it was Brandon?" I said the transfer went to his checking account. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I will talk to him." He called me back an hour later. He said Brandon was in debt. He said the business had expenses that had gotten out of control. He said Brandon had panicked and made a bad decision. Then he said the sentence I had been hearing my entire life. He said, "Do not be greedy." He said family helps family. He said let it go. I asked if he was serious. He said I should think of it as helping my brother through a difficult time. He said I had plenty of money. He said $30,000 was not going to change my life. He said Brandon needed it more than I did. I was quiet for a long time. Then I said okay. He said good. He said he knew I would understand. He said that is what family is for. I hung up the phone. I looked at the account, the retirement fund, his money, his future. $30,000 lighter, because his son could not manage a business that did not exist, and his solution was to reach into someone else's account and take what he needed. And my father had just told me to let it go. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because I knew something he did not. I knew exactly whose money Brandon had taken, and I knew exactly when my father would find out. And when that day came, every word he had just said to me was going to come back and sit on his chest like a stone. I did not call the police. I did not confront Brandon. I did not tell my mother. I just closed my laptop and waited. Because some lessons do not need to be taught. They just need time to arrive. It took 3 months. That is how long it took for the lesson to arrive. My father called me on a Saturday morning. His voice was different. Not the managed, measured voice I had grown up with. Something underneath it was shaking. He said he needed to access the retirement fund. He said there was a medical expense he had not planned for. He said he needed $40,000. I said okay. I said I will send you the current balance. I pulled up the account. I already knew what he would see. I had been watching the numbers since the morning Brandon's transfer cleared. I sent my father the statement. I did not add commentary. I did not soften it. I just sent the number. He called back 9 minutes later. I know because I watched the clock. His voice was tight. He said, "What happened to the fund?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "The balance is wrong." He said there should be close to $200,000 in that account. I said there should be. He said, "Where did it go?" I could hear him doing the math in his head. The way I do math every day at work. Except this time the numbers were not on a spreadsheet. They were on the floor of his retirement. And the answer was not a market correction or a fee adjustment. The answer was his son. I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said $30,000 was transferred out 3 months ago. He said, by who? I said, by Brandon. The line went quiet, not the quiet of someone processing information. The quiet of someone watching two truths collide in real time. The first truth was that his son had accessed an account and taken money that was not his. The second truth was that the money was not mine either, it was his, and he had spent 3 months telling me to let it go. He said that is not possible. I said I can send you the transfer record. He said that account was supposed to be secure. I said it was. Until Brandon found a way in. His breathing changed. I could hear him putting it together. Every piece clicking into place the way pieces do when the picture they form is the one you were afraid to see. He said you knew. I said yes. He said you knew when you called me 3 months ago. I said yes. He said why did you not tell me it was my money? I said because you told me to let it go. You said family helps family. You said $30,000 was not going to change my life. You said Brandon needed it more than I did. I wanted to hear you say all of that before you knew whose money it really was. He did not speak for a long time. I could hear him breathing. Then he said this is different. I said it is not different. The money was taken the same way. By the same person. From the same account. The only thing that changed is who it belonged to. When it was mine, you told me to forgive it. Now that it is yours, you want it back. That is not family helping family, that is family helping Brandon. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen and I looked at the phone on the table, and I felt something I had not expected. Not satisfaction, not victory. Sadness. Because I had just watched my father receive the same blow he had asked me to absorb. And instead of recognizing the pattern, his first instinct was to say, this is different. It was not different, it was identical. He just could not feel it until it was his. He called Brandon that afternoon. I was not on the call, but I heard about it later from my father's own mouth. It was not a conversation. It was a collision. My father demanded the money back. Brandon said he did not have it. My father asked where it went. Brandon said the business had expenses. My father asked what expenses. Brandon listed things that sounded expensive but meant nothing. Software subscriptions. A marketing consultant who turned out to be a freelancer he paid once. A co-working space he rented for 2 months and never used. My father asked to see receipts. Brandon said he would send them. He never did. Then my father asked the question he should have asked years ago. He said, "What business, Brandon? Show me the revenue. Show me one client. Show me one invoice." Brandon went quiet. The business that had been discussed at every family dinner, the one my mother praised and my father protected with silence, evaporated under 3 minutes of direct questioning. There was nothing behind the curtain. There never had been. My father asked about Brandon's rent. Brandon said he paid it himself. My father said how. Brandon said from his income. My father said what income. The conversation circled and tightened until Brandon had nowhere left to stand. And then my father called me. He said, "Did you know Brandon was not paying his own rent?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How long?" I said, 3 years. He said, "Who has been paying it?" I said, "I have." The silence again. Longer this time. Then he said, "Why?" I said, "Because you asked me to. You said he was going through a rough patch. You said it would be a month or 2. That was 3 years ago. I have been paying his rent, covering his shortfalls, and managing your retirement fund while your son has been draining both of us. The difference is I knew it. You chose not to look." He said, "I did not know it was still going on. I thought it ended after the first few months." I said, "It did not end. You never asked. You wanted it handled. You wanted it quiet. You wanted me to carry it so you would not have to hold your son accountable. That is what you have always wanted, not help, silence." I told him something else that day, something I had been holding for months. I said, 6 months ago you asked me for a personal loan. $15,000. You said it was for unexpected medical expenses. I said yes without hesitating, because that is what I do. I gave it to you the same day. I managed his fund on the same banking platform. I could see his other accounts from the same login. That is how I saw where the money really went. The same week I transferred him the money, he moved the entire amount to Brandon's credit card company. Not a hospital, not a clinic, a credit card balance. You borrowed from your daughter to pay your son's lifestyle debt, and you looked me in the eye and called it medical expenses. He did not deny it. He did not explain. He just said I was trying to help him. I said, I know. That is the problem. You have been trying to help him with my money, my credit, my time, and my silence for years. And the one time he reached into your pocket instead of mine, suddenly it is a crisis. Suddenly it is theft. Suddenly family does not help family anymore. That sentence sat between us like a wall neither of us could climb. I said I am done. I said I am not paying Brandon's rent. I am not managing your fund. I am not giving loans that get redirected to your son. I am not carrying the financial weight of a family that treats me like a utility and Brandon like a guest of honor. You protected him from every consequence. And the consequence just found you instead. Over the next few weeks, the cracks spread. My father confronted Brandon about the rent. Brandon denied it at first, then admitted it, then said it was not a big deal, then said I had offered, then said it was my idea. Each version contradicted the last. My father stopped calling Brandon. Brandon stopped coming to the house. The golden child who had been at the center of every room was suddenly standing outside every door. My father had spent years building a version of his son that could survive any scrutiny. But the version was made of air, and air does not hold when someone finally opens the window. The family dinners stopped. The phone calls between my father and Brandon went from daily to weekly to nothing. My father sat in his house with a retirement fund that was $30,000 lighter, and a relationship with his son that was worth even less. He had spent a lifetime investing in the wrong account. My father tried to recover the $30,000. Brandon did not have it. The money had gone into the same black hole every other dollar had gone into. The business that was not a business. The lifestyle that was not a lifestyle. The image of a man who looked like he was building something but had been standing on his sister's shoulders the entire time. And now the shoulders had stepped away. And he was on the ground. My mother still did not know. Not about the fund, not about the rent, not about any of it. She was living in a version of the family that had been carefully edited by the two men she trusted most. And that version was about to end. Because I was done being quiet. And the truth was louder than anything my father had ever asked me to swallow. I told my mother on a Sunday afternoon. I drove to the house. She was in the kitchen making tea the way she always does on weekends. Calm. Routine. Living inside the version of the family that two men had carefully constructed around her for years. I sat down at the table and I said, "There are things you need to know." She looked at me the way mothers look when they can hear in your voice that what is coming will not be small. She put the kettle down. She sat across from me. And I told her everything. I started with the fund. I told her my father had been keeping a separate retirement account for years, one she did not know about. One he had asked me to manage. She did not interrupt. Her face did not change, but her hands stopped moving. That was how I knew it was landing. I told her the fund had grown to nearly $200,000. I told her Brandon had accessed it and transferred $30,000 into his own account. I told her my father found out 3 months later when he needed the money and the balance was wrong. I told her my father's first reaction was not anger at Brandon. It was anger at the number. Then I told her the second part. I told her I had been paying Brandon's rent for 3 years. Every month. From my own account. I told her my father had asked me to do it, and told me it would be temporary. I told her Brandon had stood at family dinners talking about his apartment, as if he earned it while the deposit came from my checking account every first of the month. She was quiet for a long time, then she said Brandon told me he was paying his own rent. I said I know. She said your father never mentioned any of this. I said I know. Then I told her the third part. I told her 6 months ago my father had asked me for $15,000. He told me it was for medical expenses. I gave it to him the same day. I told her he transferred that money to Brandon's credit card company. Not a hospital, not a doctor, a credit card balance that Brandon had run up, funding a business that did not exist. My mother's chin dropped. Not dramatically, slowly. The way something falls, when the thing holding it up disappears inch by inch. She said, "How long has this been going on?" I said, "Years." She said, "Why did nobody tell me?" I said, "Because telling you would have meant someone had to stop protecting Brandon. And nobody in this family was willing to do that. Except me. And when I tried, I was told to let it go." She looked at the table, she looked at her hands. She looked at the kitchen she had been standing in for decades, believing her family was one thing when it was something else entirely. Two truths hit her at the same time. Her husband had kept a secret account from her, and her son had been living off her daughter while pretending to be independent. Both lies had been maintained by the same man. Both lies had been funded by the same woman. Me. She said, "I need to talk to your father." I said, "That is between you and him." She said, "I need to talk to Brandon." I said, "That is between you and Brandon." She looked at me and said, "What about us?" I said, "We are fine. You did not know. That matters." She reached across the table and held my hand. She did not say thank you. She did not say I am sorry. She just held on. And for the first time in years, that was enough. The conversation between my parents happened that evening. I was not there. I did not want to be. My mother called me the next morning. Her voice was steady but thin. She said, "Your father confirmed everything." She said he tried to explain and she told him to stop explaining. She said the part that hurt the most was not the money. It was the secret. The fact that he had built a financial life she was not part of. The fact that he had used their daughter to carry their son. The fact that he had lied to her face about the loan. She said she told him she needed time and she did not know how much. My father did not call me for 2 weeks. When he did, his voice was flat. Not angry, not managed, empty. He said, "Your mother and I are working through some things." I said, "I know." He said, "Brandon is not returning my calls." I said, "I know." He said, "I made mistakes." I said, "Yes." He said, "I should have listened to you 3 months ago." I said, "You should have listened to me 3 years ago." He was quiet. Then he said, "I am sorry I told you to let it go." I said, "Which time?" He did not answer. Because the answer was every time. Every time Brandon broke something and my father told me to absorb it. Every rent check. Every redirected loan. Every excuse wrapped in the phrase, "family helps family." He had been using that sentence like a bandage. But bandages do not fix what is broken underneath. They just keep you from seeing it. He apologized for not listening to me. He has not yet apologized for choosing Brandon every single time. Those are different apologies. I am still waiting for the second one. Brandon reached out once, not to me, to my mother. He sent a message saying he was going through a hard time and needed support. My mother replied with one line. She said, "Support is not something you steal from your sister's bank account." He did not respond. Brandon's rent was due the following month. For the first time in 3 years, my transfer did not arrive. I do not know where he lives now. I do not know if he found a job. I do not know if he thinks about what he did. I just know I stopped being the person who tracks his life for him. And that absence still has edges. Some nights I wonder if he is okay. Then I remember that wondering was always my job and never his. He never once wondered how I was paying for it all. So I let the wondering go the same way I let the money go. Not easily, but deliberately. Months passed. The family did not collapse the way I expected. It shifted. My parents stayed together. It was not warm, it was honest. And honest, I have learned, is harder than warm, but it lasts longer. There are mornings I wake up and check my phone expecting a crisis. The crisis does not come. And the quiet that follows is not peace yet. It is just the absence of noise. I am still learning the difference. My father started managing his own retirement fund. He asked me for the account credentials. I transferred them without commentary. He did not ask me to keep managing it. I think he understood that the era of handing me things to carry was over. He thanked me when I sent the access codes. It was the first time he had thanked me for anything related to money. It was small. But small things from people who have been silent for years are not small. They are first steps. My mother and I talk more now. She calls on Tuesdays mostly. Some Tuesdays we talk for an hour. Some Tuesdays there are silences that last longer than the words. She is learning. So am I. She called last month and started a sentence with "your brother needs," then stopped herself. She said, "Never mind." That pause was worth more than any apology. She told me once that she wished she had known sooner. I said the people who kept it from you were the people you trusted most. She said that is the part that keeps her up at night. I said I know, I carried the same thing for years. I still work in finance, I still walk through houses and assess their value. I still notice when numbers do not add up. But I do not carry anyone else's balance sheet anymore. My money stays in my accounts, my name stays on my documents. And the word family no longer comes with an invoice attached. They did not lose a daughter when I stopped paying. They lost a service. And the day they understand the difference is the day the family starts over. My father asked me recently if I thought things could go back to the way they were. I said no. He looked hurt. I said they should not go back, they should go forward. And forward means everyone carries their own weight. Including Brandon. Including you. He nodded. He did not argue, he did not say family helps family. He just nodded. And for the first time in my life, my father's silence felt like agreement with me instead of protection for someone else. If your family has ever used the word love to describe something that looked a lot more like a monthly payment, I want you to hear this. You are not a fund. You are not a safety net. You are not the person who holds everything together while the person who breaks everything gets protected. You are allowed to close the account. And if the people who depended on it call that betrayal, remember, they were not calling when the deposits were on time. They were only calling when they stopped. Have you ever stopped carrying someone financially and watched the truth come out? Tell me what happened in the comments, and tell me where you are watching from right now. If this story hit you, subscribe. I will see you in the next one.